I'm doing well. I'm willing to put that on hold to come help in whatever way.
State, very mainstream media, more than my guest today. Yeah. No elected official scares mainstream media more than my guest today. Yeah. I mean, Donald Trump was the devil, which makes my guest today worse than the devil. The whirlwind started in 2018 when he was elected governor of the third most populous state in the U.S., a margin of just 32,000 votes. Hardly what pundits would call a mandate for sweeping policy changes. But then a once-in-a-century pandemic hits, and he dared to question the lockdown policies of the D.C. establishment, erred on the side of maintaining freedom for the people of his state. Very risky. But this immediately put him right in the crosshairs of the national media, who wanted to make them their new favorite, grandma killer monster. CBS even fabricated a story about him on 60 Minutes and never, to this day, has retracted it. Even when Democrats point out the lie, doesn't matter. But it's okay, they can lie because he's a Republican governor. Then he goes on a streak of common sense reforms that draw the ire of left-wing forces from teachers' unions to banks to the Walt Disney Company. And all of that is on top of him trying to help his wife with her battle of cancer and guiding his state's recovery from one of the most devastating hurricanes in history. Meanwhile, outlets like MSNBC keep labeling him dangerous. Yeah, Mitt Romney was too, and anyway, despite the media's very best effort, he runs for re-election last fall. He wins by 19 points. That is the largest raw vote margin of victory in his state's history. These are the adventures of Ron DeSantis, the swashbuckling governor of Florida. We had to pay Errol Flynn for the use of that word, swashbuckler. He crammed a ton of action into his first term in office, but talking with him, you get the distinct feeling that he's just getting started. Today, please welcome Governor Ron DeSantis. Before we get started, I want you to listen to something.
Nobody thinks that I can take their house and borrow against the house. No, I have title insurance for that. No, it's in my name, or he would have to get some special document. They would call me. Nobody's calling you. After I've stolen the title, borrowed against it, or sold the property, or done whatever I've done with it, it's 60 to 90 days to even figure out that they're the victim of this crime. By that point, you start getting foreclosure notices, and you realize you've got 4 mortgages on your house. Not only that, you don't even own your home anymore. It's not even in your name.
Wow, that guy sounds super friendly, doesn't he? He got caught forging and refiling people's home titles. Lots of others who have done this haven't been caught yet. Home title fraud is on the rise in this country, and neither your standard identity theft programs nor your homeowner's insurance protects you from any of this. That's why you should choose Home Title Lock. You might already be a victim and not know it. Just find out, just lock this stuff up so you can take it off your plate. HomeTitleLock.com. HomeTitleLock.com. Get a free title scan with sign up. It's like $100 value. You get it for free. HomeTitleLock.com. Make sure you use the promo code BACK. Ronald Reagan said that everybody has their own time. He said, I didn't change. I was the same guy with Goldwater. He said, but it's like you just kind of, time goes on, you just slot in, and then you pop back out, and your time has passed. Do you think you're slotting in now?
Well, I think, you look, Glenn, like in the last 5 years for me being governor, had I been like a U.S. senator or something else, I would not have been able to do the things I've done or get the notoriety that I've done. People in other states probably wouldn't know who the heck I was.
Right.
I was put, God put me in a position to be at the helm of the third largest state at age 40, youngest governor in the country.
Right.
And, we had a lot of good things going for us. We did a lot of good things. Then COVID hits. Then all this other stuff with cultural Marxism is attacking our families, and I'm standing up against that, standing up at Disney. So, you're in positions to lead, and some people do and some people don't. And I think that I've been able to lead under difficult circumstances in a way that I think people appreciate.
So you went to Congress, you were a congressman for a while. Kind of a Tea Party kind of guy. Would you consider yourself a Tea Party?
I was the founder of the Freedom Company. We were anti-establishment.
Right.
We wanted to overturn the D.C. order and really bring fundamental change. I know you were involved in that, and it was tough.
What happened?
It was tough.
What happened? Because there was a time period, and I see it differently now. There was a time period where I thought, all that was waste, nothing, and I don't think so. I think we planted early seeds, and you're seeing a much more mature kind of approach to it now.
What happened? So the 2010, I was not in then. I got in 2010, so I was in there for 3 terms. I think the 2010 was a massive wave. And I think that the wave just got ahead of the DC Republicans. They didn't know what to do with it. And I think they decided that the way they wanted to govern, the insiders, is to focus more on batting back our own base rather than trying to harness the energy from our base to take down Obama and to beat Obama. And I think that sowed the seeds for Trump being able to win the nomination. People were so frustrated with the D.C. Republicans, nothing was changing, and they wanted something more dramatic. But I agree with you. I think a lot of the people that got into politics then on the grassroots level are still some of the people that are really making a difference now.
And even a next generation is coming. But you still see the same kind of problems. And we're going to get to Florida here in a second, but I want to kind of take it chronologically with you. The D.C. politics, the GOP still doesn't seem to really understand. I think we are in a time period where in our lifetime, and maybe very soon, we could see the collapse of this country if we're not careful and wise. And there's so many people that just in politics in Washington that either don't see it or they're so arrogant that they just think, we're doing it. Or they're part of the problem.
Well, just think about, we're in Texas, right? I'm from Florida. If it wasn't for Florida and Texas in this country and some of the other reds, where would we be?
Right.
I mean, we would be California writ large.
Yes.
We'd be suffering under the cloak of woke ideology, and America as we know it would be gone. I think the challenge for us, and I think the people inside D.C. just don't see kind of where the battle lines are, is we're very much in a post-constitutional era.
Mm-hmm.
We have a bureaucracy that's running totally amok. It's been weaponized against factions of society it doesn't like. It is not accountable to the electorate. I mean, we had an election in 2016 where president was elected, Republican president, Trump's elected, and the government decided that they didn't want to accept the results of the election. And so I think, like, if you look back in the past when we were fighting big government, like under Ronald Reagan, government was a problem, but the way and I think it does call into question who governs. Are we governing according to what the founding fathers envisioned, or are we in this era in which the elites are going to get their way one way or another? And that's really the central fight.
It was 2003, I think. I went to the White House. I met with George W. Bush, and I said, we were starting to be mired up in Iraq and everything else, and I said, Mr. President, he spoke very frankly with me off the record, and I said, where is this guy? Where's this guy? That's just speaking and saying this is what it is. And he talked about the responsibilities of the president, and then he said, what happens with the next guy, and he said, don't worry. The next guy that gets in, he said, he's going to sit in this chair, and he's going to have most of the same people advise, and they will realize the president's hands are tied. He's got to go down this road. And he said that to kind of comfort me, and I was freaked out by him. Like, what good are you? What good is any president if the same people are just running things?
Yeah, and I mean, you know, Article 2 invests the executive power in that elected president. They don't invest it in the permanent bureaucracy, but yet this has been able to really consolidate. Why is it consolidated, though? Congress has abdicated its responsibility.
Yes.
They're supposed to make laws. What do? They kind of do suggestions and tell the bureaucracy to figure it out. That's a transfer of power from the American people to unelected bureaucrats. How do they handle their most potent weapon? What James Madison says, the most potent, the power of the purse. Continuing resolutions to keep the government going on autopilot. Okay, well, if you have the FBI where there's malfeasance there, you're not holding them accountable by continuing the rating train for them. If there's abuse of government, the way to do it is to have the House of Representatives stop funding the abuses. They have never been willing to do that for really my entire adult lifetime. And so the government just keeps going on autopilot. And the founders would have said, it's human. It's, you know, the deep state's not a conspiracy. It's the natural, it's the logical culmination of human nature without constitutional constraints or accountability. Of course, you're going to have a consolidation of power. And then I think what's happened in our country, because the universities are churning out people that have the same kind of philosophical bent, they're all gravitating to be in D.C. That's why you'd have D.C. is the most democratic jurisdiction in the country, 95% to 5 in the 2020 election, and it raises huge implications for whether we're a self-governing people.
So, I don't think our founders saw one of the branches just ceding their power to the other.
The opposite. I mean, you know,
yeah.
Federalist 51. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition.
Correct.
You're the president. I'm in the legislature. You're going to try to increase your power. I'm going to be very jealous of that. And I'm going to push back because I don't want my branch to be subservient to you.
Correct.
But that's not what's happening. Why is that? I think it's because it's easier for them to remain in office to pass the buck.
Yeah.
Because when you have to make big decisions, there's going to be some people that like it, but there's going to be other people that don't like it. And so I think the inertia of, okay, their number one goal is to remain in office, and so they're fine giving away their power as long as they get to be nominal members of the legislature in perpetuity. That's not the way the system's supposed to operate.
Okay, so you leave Congress. Before you leave Congress, you're there on the baseball field because you're a good baseball player. You're on the baseball field the day of the shooting. Tell me a little bit about that.
So a lot of people, I guess, don't appreciate, like, the members of Congress, they take this baseball game very seriously.
Oh, I know.
So it's a charity game every year. They play it at Washington National Stadium, and it is hardball. It is now they're not throwing, very hard, but it is what it is. And so they would practice for like 6 weeks leading into it, and I played sometimes I didn't, but anyway, so we're there. So the day before the game, we have practice, and I'm at third base. Jeff Duncan from South Carolina, congressman, was at shortstop. He drove me, his aide drove me and Jeff to the field. We had already taken batting practice. We're just shagging balls, and I didn't want to get caught in traffic that day, so I told Jeff, why don't we just get out of here early, beat some traffic? He's like, okay. So we went, we walked, took off our spikes, walked to the car. Some guy stops Jeff and I, and he asked Jeff, he's like, are those the Republicans or are those the Democrats? And Jeff's like, that's the Republican congressional baseball team. The guy's like, okay, turned around. He starts walking towards the third base side of the field, outside where the stands are. We get in the car, we leave. I get to Capitol Hill, I'm in the gym showering, getting ready to shower. The shooting at the baseball field is there. So what he did, he went to his van. He pulled out a rifle and a pistol. He set up right on the third base side of the dugout and started shooting. So Jeff and I would have been number one in the line of fire had we stayed for probably five or 7 more minutes. As it was, he's shooting and he shot Steve Scalise, who was playing second base. 10 minutes before Scalise was shot, I'm fielding ground balls and throwing double plays to Scalise at second base. And then 10 minutes later, so the only reason there wasn't a big massacre that day is because Scalise was a member of the Republican leadership. He got a Capitol Police detail because of that. So we had Capitol Police officers there, not because of any other member, just because of Steve. So they started engaging, and they ended up shooting and killing this guy. So he shot a few people. Scalise was the only congressman that got shot, but he would have had free reign for the whole thing. And this was a guy. So as soon as we saw, people started to try to figure out who it was, and the guy had a Twitter account, and he was a raging leftist. And we saw his picture. I showed it to Duncan. I'm like, that's the guy. Jeff's like, that's the guy. And it was clearly politically motivated. And, you know, one of the things that happened was the media, they tried to just totally ignore that. I mean, just think about it. If there was somebody who once listened to your show who did anything, they would be all over you, telling your avatar, all this stuff. Instead, this was a clearly politically motivated assassination attempt, and they basically just buried it. And the FBI said initially it was not something that was politically motivated. It was suicide by cop. I mean, how outrageous is this? And so, you know, it was the type of thing where, you know, you see that, and I just thought, okay, you know, my life would have been different maybe if I had been out there for 10 more minutes. And that's not something you typically think about, but I mean, it was a pretty close call.
The press. Is there any? How does this turn around? I mean, CBS did 60 Minutes. They've never corrected it. It was bald-faced lie. To my knowledge, they've never even apologized for it.
They tried to defend it. I mean, you know, they tried to defend it from other angles, and they did acknowledge that they kind of, or at least tacitly acknowledge that they got caught red-handed. But I think it's just arrogance. I think that they believe that, look, if they put out something false, yes, people like you and me aren't going to believe it because we're onto them. But there may be a segment of people that believe it.
It's getting smaller and smaller.
And yeah, it is. And so, but I think what's happened is because they keep doing this, they lose credibility and lose trust more and more. So they're playing for a smaller audience that will actually believe of what they say. I think a good example of this is like, just think about the last few years in Florida. I mean, they did all they could to demonize me in COVID. They were acting like we're a COVID wasteland, how reckless to have kids in school, businesses.
You're a chief grandma.
And yet, how did the American people respond to that? They responded by visiting Florida on record numbers and moving to Florida on record numbers. So that tells me that what they're doing just isn't working. And in fact, the 60 Minutes, you know, we looked in to see like the defamation. It's very difficult for someone like me to do it. But the reason why, I mean, two reasons. One, I'm governor. I can't be getting involved in litigation. But two, is like I couldn't show damages. It benefited me because it was so obvious that they were threatened by me and my success in Florida, and they wanted to try something to rough me up, and they really face planted. So I'd go in and say, wait a minute, you know, I'm better known now, and more people probably support me now. But I think it's just, there's got to be a recognition on the financial incentives on some of this stuff, because if you were to pivot some, you know, there is a bigger market to be able to be had. I think the problem, though, is because I've talked to heads of corporations who oversee some of these news channels, and they understand. The problem is, it's like the inmates run the asylum there. If you wanted to move CNN or NBC to center, or maybe even like throw us a bone once in a while, you'd have to fire the entire company because they're all wired. They're getting into media because they want to change policy. They want to impose their views on the rest of us, but they know they couldn't get elected to anything, so they're not going to be able to do that. So this is a way for them to be able to have some power over what's going on in society. So it's very difficult to see how you do. But here's just fine. I mean, during COVID, so like, you know, Disney World is open in Florida, Disneyland is closed in California, Universal's open in Orlando, it's closed in California. And, you know, these executives are like, Florida's doing it right, California's doing it wrong. It's a disaster. They're all saying this. They're telling me this privately. And yet their news arms of those companies are reporting just the opposite. Right. They're saying how bad Florida is and how good California is. And I'm just thinking to myself, this is your own company. You guys you're acknowledging the truth, and yet you have news organizations that are putting out things that are contrary to what you yourselves are saying are the facts.
There is only one thing that I like that is progressive. Because I think progressives are destroying everything except the eyeglasses. But somehow or another, I don't think Theodore Roosevelt had anything to do with progressive eyeglasses. I use Rodenstock glasses from Better Spectacles Now. Better Spectacles Now is a conservative American company who is now offering exclusively Rodenstock eyewear for the first time in the U.S. Now, Rodenstock, I guess that's important. Actually, it is. It's a 144-year-old German company that is really considered to be the world's gold standard for glasses. Rodenstock scientists use biometric research to measure the eye in over 7,000 points. And they've taken the findings from over 1 million patients and combined that with artificial intelligence, and the result is a biometric intelligence glasses, or big glasses, which gives you a seamless and natural experience no matter where you're looking in your glasses. It works perfectly, as your brain is wired the same way, and it improves your vision sharpness at all distances, including up to 40% better at near and intermediate distance, as well as providing you with better night vision. Right now, I can see what you're wearing. That's how good these are. BetterSpectacles.com/Beck. Go there now, schedule a teleoptical appointment. You don't even have to leave the comfort of your home, offering an introductory 61% off their progressive eyewear, plus free handcrafted Rodenstock frames. Don't mess around with your eyesight. Go to betterspectacles.com/Beck. I remember when you, and you talk about it in the book, and it is fascinating, the decision to open the state up. And I remember my wife and I prayed for you that night because that was extraordinarily risky. I mean, we can't forget. That's why I give people at the very beginning a pass. I don't care. You were for mask, you were for closing everything down. At the very beginning, they were welding people in their homes in China. We had no idea what was coming our way. But even when you said go, it wasn't clear that that was the right move. Just medically speaking, it wasn't clear it was the right move. And I remember praying for you, going, Lord, give him strength and please advise, because this could go horribly wrong. I was thrilled that you did it.
It was unpopular, though.
But I'm glad I didn't have to make the decision.
It was unpopular.
Yes.
I mean, I think part of the problem was there was data and evidence supporting what I was doing, but it was getting no play with the media. They had their narrative, and that's just what they were going to do. So I talk about it a little bit in the book. We all got models from these epidemiologists. Every governor did, and the White House was looking at them too, about the hospitalization spikes that were going to happen. And they were projecting, I mean, horrific death, because we wouldn't have enough hospital beds to care for almost any patient other than COVID.
Correct.
And so it's like, okay, you either need to, to separate and not have, groups getting together to reduce the spread, or you're going to have some, and, in Florida, I'm sitting here, third largest state. We're an international hub. Yeah. We're a domestic tourism hub. And I've got
elderly.
I've got senior citizens. Mm-hmm. I've got almost 4,000 long-term care facilities. I've got elderly lined up in condos all across the coast, particularly in southern Florida. So this was an existential threat to our state in terms of something that's affecting elderly people. But you looked at those models, and they were just grievously wrong. And I'm following it to the day. I mean, like, I'm looking to see what they're predicting for Florida, and I'm seeing it's much less, and then I'm seeing it's much less. And so this is like late March, early April 2020. You also had people like Bhattacharya from Stanford that are looking at the antibodies. Well, it turns out a lot of these people had antibodies. That means it had spread far enough that doing this indefinitely was just not going to work. It also meant that it was not as lethal as we initially feared, because whatever's testing positive, there's way more people who had it. Therefore, the death rate was lower. So we looked at all those, and then I was just concerned about the toll. It's one thing to say, take 2 weeks off from school or whatever. That's not great, but to just say different. And I think the thing that really gave me the determination was Fauci came out in sometime in April of 2020, and he was asked, well, when can people open? And he's like, when there's no cases and no deaths. I remember it. That means that changes it from slow the spread for a few weeks to all of a sudden lockdown. Until when? Because you're never going to get to that point. So basically what Fauci was saying, the default posture of the United States needed to be locked down, and that was unacceptable to me. So I was like, okay, we're going to do this. And so we worked on all that, and particularly with the schools was very important, and the businesses. And what happened was, as we got into June, people were like, you know what? They didn't admit it publicly. Like, maybe the governor was right. Things seem to be going good. But then the South, we got a summer wave of COVID. That's just the way it was. So we get hit with it, and the media is like, DeSantis caused it. He's reckless, opening the state.
Right.
This is all his fault. But, I knew that wasn't the reason, because I had looked to see the different charts of how the waves had been in other parts of the world. Whether you lock down or not, it was a 6 to 8 week cycle, and then it would move. Now, we didn't appreciate at the time just how sharply seasonal this was. I started to say that like 9 months in, and the media, DeSantis is saying it's seasonal. Now they all admit it's seasonal, but it was obvious because it was happening. So I was in a situation where Fauci's saying to shut down. I had every Democrat member of Congress from Florida write me a letter saying, you're killing people, you're reckless, you need to shut down this state, you can't have kids in school, all that in July.
You can't be in your position with the data that you have, but still, if you're human, you still had to have lingering doubt. Did you, at any point, did you look and go, God, I mean, I really think I'm right, but gosh, what if I'm wrong?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, I had humility in all this, humility. I mean, I'm just a governor. I mean, I'm working on the data, and I got into it, and I ended up, Bhattacharya seems to say DeSantis knew the data more than a lot of the doctors did who's actually doing it. I started to get a lot of supporters, friends, like long-term that call me. It's like, man, you're getting killed. You need to do something different. You need to mandate masks. You need to just do a 2-week shutdown. Just do something. The parents, the grandparents are upset about the kids going back to school soon. And, I was just like, look, I think that would be harmful to do everything you're telling me. It may be beneficial for me in the short term politically. Maybe I dug myself a hole politically that I don't recover from. It is possible, but my job is to defend the jobs and the well-being of the people that I represent. I can't be worried about my own job over that. And so I basically said, let's let the political chips fall where they may. I'm going to stick with it. And so basically we held firm. The wave passed. And then as we started to get into August, early September, people are like, you know what? Maybe Florida was right. Because at that point, they said the only way COVID curve will bend down is a lockdown.
Right.
If you don't do it, it's just exponential growth,
Correct.
Infinitum. And we showed, because I saw what happened in Sweden and other parts of the world, that wasn't true. So then once we got over that, a lot of Floridians started to get confidence, because I think like the first couple months of it, what I was doing was not popular. And I was popular going into COVID, was not popular. The schools were very unpopular because the elderly, they were scared.
Yeah.
And they thought the schools would lead to more. And I knew that wasn't the case. And so we did. But then as we got over, then all of a sudden it's like, people are like ready. The state started to boom. People started coming down, and we were really off to the races at that point. But I would say, that was really a critical juncture. And I think had I caved or buckled there, I think the future of the state would have been dramatically different.
Oh, yes. And possibly the future of the country.
The country, because I think because I took all the abuse, that made it easier for other people to follow in our path at that point.
Are you guys out of state of emergency?
Oh, yeah. And the only reason
Texas is not.
Yeah.
I just talked to the Freedom Caucus yesterday. When are we going to get out of this?
And actually, what we did, so we did the state of emergency for about a year. The only reason I kept it is because I used the state of emergency to force the schools open. So I had to get through that first school year to ensure that all schools in Florida would be open. I probably would not have been able to do that absent the state of emergency. So that was our leverage, because I can control money. Basically, state of emergency allows you to move money around a little bit more. So we did that. It also allowed me to overrule local governments, and particularly some of the liberal governments, and say, you're not going to be penalizing people for masks, no business closures. We set that down, and I needed the state of emergency to do that. Then the legislature came in the next spring, and we made these protections permanent. And I asked them, I said, do a bill to rein in the governor's executive emergency powers and to rein in local governments. And so Florida actually has constricted the powers. One of the crazy things about this, and you'd appreciate it, it was almost not questioned in American history that these local governments have like these massive health problems, like emergency health problems.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, it's like, but I couldn't find. So one of my concerns when I'm fighting back against this, I was afraid I was going to lose in court on some of this. The law was not great on it, but I think what happened was I was strategic in when I was pulling these levers so that when I would do it, I had like a lot of business guys excited, people going back to work, and it made it harder for a county to try to sue me to basically throw people out of their jobs. And so we were able to get through that. And I never lost a case in all the things that I was doing.
You talk about this in the book with Burns. And it's a little terrifying when she said, well, this is kind of just our little science experiment.
Very much so.
Can you tell that story?
So the White House desk was just hammering me for like the first like 3 months because they wanted me to be clamping down harder, and she was so I called and just tell me, when in American history, Mara, has this been done and what were the results? Because like I kind of feel like we're flying blind here and we may be doing things that would be damaging. As she said, she's like, it's kind of our own science experiment that we're doing in real time. And that didn't sit well with me.
No.
I mean, you're a citizen of a republic. You're not a guinea pig. And so I think that there's a whole bunch of other things I talk about in the book. You remember the George Floyd riots when the epidemiologists,
Yeah.
because people were saying, you've been telling people you have
in.
to stay in your home. And like in Florida, they were killing us because even in those early days, when we were following federal guidelines loosely, but we were following some, we were playing golf. I mean, the villages, they're setting records for golf. People are voting, all this stuff. They were so mad at Florida for doing that. People on the beach, all this stuff. That was their position. You are killing people if you leave your house. So then all these people are, like thousands of people are protesting. 2,000 of these epidemiologists wrote a letter saying, we do not condemn these protests because of COVID. Indeed, we think they're vital for public health because they're fighting racism.
It's a bigger disease than COVID.
And so that's when I knew. Is this public health a clan of people? They are sick. I mean, they are ideologically captured, and these are not people that should be anywhere near the levers of power. So I basically, from that point on, I would exclusively listen to a very handful of people. Bhattacharya from Stanford, Martin Kulldorff from Harvard, Scott Atlas, Sunetra Gupta from Oxford, and then my Surgeon General, Joe Latipo, we brought in from UCLA.
Yeah.
Great. But I mean, Joe Latipo to this day is the only Surgeon General, Florida's the only state, that has said, don't give mRNA shots to the babies, to the 6-month-old babies. There's no evidence that this is anything helpful, and we're basically saying there's no evidence to do it. We don't know what the harms would be, and there may be some, but you don't even have to go there. If it's not beneficial to you, don't put it in your home. I mean, that's just, we're the only state that's done that. Why? I think some of these other states agree with us, but in that kind of profession, they don't want to buck pharma. They don't want to buck the consensus. And so that was something but that letter was very eye-opening because it was patently, and they actually said in that letter, you can protest for the George Floyd stuff, but you can't protest against lockdowns.
Right.
So they were drawing a content-based distinction between why you're gathering.
like the virus knows.
It's a woke virus. Come on,
I know you work hard for your money. I mean, I don't. I sit here and talk. Sometimes it's work. It's not great. But when you have to spend that money, if you're like me, you prefer to spend it on things that are made here in America, that are quality. It's not just a patriotic thing. It's a quality thing. It's a Save America kind of thing. The things that are made here in America traditionally have lasted longer, work better, set the standard for the rest of the world. That's one of the reasons I like partnering with the companies that I do. And one of those companies that is really on the cutting edge is Grip6. Grip6.com. You're getting the true American experience, and this is what I mean. The product you can count on. Let's just take their socks. You buy their socks, you have a great sock, okay? It's not going to wear out right away. It keeps your feet cold in the winter and warm in the summer. Reverse that. Felt a little like Willy Wonka. Reverse that. Keep your feet warm in the winter, cold in the summer. Exactly the way your socks should work. But beyond all of that, The ranchers here in America, they grow the or raise the specially bred sheep that produce the modern wool. Then you have the American manufacturers who wash the wool, process it. Then you have people who weave that into a sock, and they're fantastic. American business owners who have accepted the risk that comes along with only using American-made products and American labor. Please, check them out. grip6.com/Beck. That's grip6.com/Beck. American-made. You have done so many things that at the beginning, you kind of held your breath, at least those of us who watched it, kind of held our breath going, I really agree with this. I hope this is right. Because you were just reestablishing a democratic republic. You know what I mean? You can't do this to your people. And now the results are so clear, just based on the success, the health and the welfare, the economy, everything about Florida is booming, absolutely booming. Why aren't we? I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to send these to all 50 governors. I got 50 of them made. And I'm not comparing you to the other one that has the band, but it's WWRD. Yeah. What would Ron do? Why are the governors not taking the things that have a clear success record and just mirror them? I don't understand. Just politically, why aren't they doing this?
I think you're starting to see that, though, Glenn. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons I work so hard for re-election, because in this business, you have a guy like me. I just want to do what I think is right, and I want to be able to look in the mirror and say, I'm fighting for the folks, and I'm delivering. And the political calculations just aren't as important to me. I just figure, it'll all work out. But there's a lot of people in this business that are different, and they really want to know what the politics of it. They want to know what that means electorally. Well, we now have a record of that. I came in, won by 32,000 votes, one of the closest governor's races, swing state, very, very famous swing state.
Nobody says that now.
4 years later, we win by 1.5 million votes, almost 20-point victory, and we sweep in supermajorities in the legislature, school board, all this other stuff. I mean, we've left the Democratic Party in Florida dead on the side of the road. I mean, this has been a major, major realignment. So I think people are now looking, and I think they're saying, you know what? This guy's doing this stuff. Yeah, the media has a spasm anytime he does anything. The left has a spasm. But the vast majority of the public thinks this is common sense. And he's speaking to people through that media filter in ways that are effective. So you are seeing now in state capitals. I mean, Texas is going to be doing a lot of the stuff we're doing. I've already talked to some of the legislators. They're ready to go. There was an article that said DeSantis' shadow looms over state capitals as they reconvene, because people are looking they're looking at the Florida model, and they're saying, okay, Florida did this. We need to be doing this too. So I do think you're starting to see it. I think I think in the first.
What's crazy is the people who write that. It's not that you are some dictator going against the people. They all want democracy. Floridians love what you're doing.
Yes.
So why do they have a problem when it's popular with the people all of a sudden?
And not only that, they will act like somehow this is a perversion of the system to put an idea in front of the legislature, have them act favorably on it, and me sign it into law and then execute it. That's how constitutional government works.
Right.
But they say that that's somehow bad. Meanwhile, Obama and Biden, they do executive orders. They don't even go through the legislature, and the media praises that when they're basically changing society and laws through executive fiat. So they just don't like what we're doing. And here's the thing. We're beating them. That is why they're so upset. We are beating the left in Florida, and I don't think we've had an example in my lifetime where you had a government systematically beat the left across a wider range of issues than we've beat them in the state of Florida. We've beat them in a way that has fundamentally realigned the state, and I think has put us on a trajectory to be the leading red state in America for the next 10, 20 years.
I will tell you, I'm again, talking to the Freedom Caucus yesterday, say, Texas. I bet on Texas. And, my wife and I are looking at a place in Florida. And I mean, you've done horrible things to the real estate. It's bad for people who try to want to move in now. It's the real estate is shot through the roof.
Hey, it's bad for my wife and I. We have a young family, so we sold our house, moved to the governor's mansion, and we priced ourselves out.
I
of
know.
buying anything.
I know. It's crazy. But, I mean, that's good for the people of Florida. But I want to address something that you and I talked about maybe 2 years ago. And I want to ask again, our country has a problem that cannot survive just on this system of massive swing this way, and then the next guy gets in and it's a massive swing that way. It's destructive. And that's because we are governing by fiat. Tell me how you are stripping power so you can't, or restoring constitutional norms in Florida. So when you leave, because you can't do a third term, when you leave, it doesn't become New York.
Well, one of the things I was able to do is we had the most liberal Supreme Court in the country for a long time. And you remember Bush versus Gore, the circus. I get elected. It's a 4-3 liberal split by that time. But 3 of the 4 liberals had mandatory retirement. So the day I got sworn in, they're off the court. So my first month in office, I put 3 conservatives to replace the 3 liberals. What that has done is that has ended judicial activism in the state of Florida. And all these justices are between like 44 and 50, so they can serve till they're 75. Now, some of them may end up on federal courts or whatever, but the bottom line is that had been one of the biggest impediments in Florida, that you could win elections